There's a strand hanging on a hook at the end of the jewelry counter. $6. Cream, leaning a little yellow. The pearls aren't quite the same size all the way around. The clasp is dull and scratched. No box, no paperwork. Take a second and answer honestly. Would you put it back? Most people do, and they're not being careless. They have 5 reasons, and every one of them sounds sensible. Not white enough. Not round enough. Clasp looks old. Pearls don't match. No certificate. Here's what took me a long time to understand. In certain strands, those same 5 reasons are exactly why someone who knows pearls slows down instead of walking away. I'm not going to tell you that necklace is valuable. Nobody can, from a hook. What I'll give you is something better, and it lasts. The skill isn't knowing that a strand is valuable. The skill is knowing when not to walk away. Because walking away is the part that costs money. Nobody ever lost anything by looking at a necklace for 1 more minute. People lose things by clearing out a house in a weekend or handing a bag of jewelry to a buyer who offers $40 for the lot. So we're going to look at 10 kinds of pearl strands that look wrong. Wrong color, wrong shape, wrong size, wrong everything. And stay with me for number 1, because it isn't exotic at all. It may look exactly like the necklace sitting in your mother's jewelry box right now. One ground rule before we start. We're screening, not appraising. I'm not a certified appraiser, and anything genuinely unusual deserves a qualified professional. Screening is what you do under bad fluorescent lights with 3 necklaces tangled in one hand. That's all we're doing here, and you won't need to memorize 10 categories. I put this whole check onto a 1-page printable guide, and I'll show you how to use it at the end. Here's the framework. 3 layers, and we'll come back to them again and again. Layer 1 is construction. Did somebody once spend real money putting this together? The clasp. Any mark on the back of it. Whether there are knots between the pearls, whether the findings feel solid or flimsy. Construction tells you about intent. Layer 2 is how the pearls behave, not whether they're round. Turn the strand sideways to the light instead of looking straight at it, and watch whether the shine seems to come from inside the pearl or sit on top of it. That difference is called luster, and once you've seen it, you never unsee it. Layer 3 is context. Does this look like something that's lived 50 or 100 years? Is the clasp the same age as the strand? Is there one pearl that doesn't belong? And one phrase runs underneath all 3. Clue, not proof. An old clasp is a clue. Knots are a clue. An odd shape is a clue. Not one of them, by itself, proves anything. Hold on to that, because almost every bad piece of advice in this subject comes from someone turning a clue into a verdict. 10 strands. Let's go. Number 10. And this one's genuinely strange, so let me say it plainly. Sometimes the pearls really are fake, and the necklace still isn't cheap. You can see it from across the room. Glass, plastic, a little seam around the middle. Most people set it down in 2 seconds and feel clever about it. The common mistake is assuming the beads were the product. In costume jewelry, they never were. The maker was the product, the design was the product, the handwork was the product. So here's the clue. Look at the hardware instead of the beads. Filigree cups holding each bead. Beads individually wired by hand rather than strung. A little nameplate riveted on the back. Findings heavier than they have any right to be. Bonhams has sold Chanel costume jewelry connected to Maison Gripois, a Paris workshop that's been making poured glass for the fashion houses since the 1800s. Published results have run from around £1,000 up into several $1,000s, depending on the period, the condition, and how well documented the piece is. That's a long way from the $4 bin. It's also a long way from a fortune, and I want to be honest about that. Ordinary costume pearls are ordinary costume pearls. This is about the small fraction that were made in a workshop. Your action is 1 sentence. If the beads look cheap but the hardware looks expensive, stop judging the beads and go identify the maker and what it does not prove. A well-made clasp doesn't tell you the necklace is signed, or old, or valuable. It tells you somebody cared once. That's a reason to keep looking, not a conclusion. Number 9 is the opposite problem. The pearls are real, and the necklace looks too plain to matter. Small pearls, cream rather than bright white, a modest little clasp. It looks like something a woman wore to church in 1962, because very often that's exactly what it is. The common mistake here is size. People assume bigger pearls mean more money. With branded jewelry, identity can matter before diameter. Mikomoto publishes this on its own customer information pages. Their jewelry can be identified by a trademark, either the outline of an oyster or the Mikimoto name engraved on the piece, and on a necklace that mark sits on the back of the clasp. Now here's the part that almost nobody quotes, and it comes from the same place. Because the clasp is the only spot that mark appears on a strand. Mikimoto says a strand can't be appraised as genuine without it. Read that in the other direction and you get something very useful. Clasps travel. They get sold separately, and they get moved onto other necklaces. A marked clasp is a strong reason to investigate. It is not a verdict on the pearls hanging from it. And let me keep you honest in the other direction too. A signed strand with modest pearls and no paperwork has come up at regional auction carrying an estimate in the low hundreds of dollars. A signature changes the question from old pearl necklace to identified jewelry worth researching. It doesn't automatically change the number. Action. Magnify the clasp and photograph the mark before you do anything else. Do not polish it. Polishing compound is how people erase the single most identifying feature on the entire necklace, permanently. Number 8. It looks like somebody spray painted these pearls black. Charcoal. Green. Grey. Deep eggplant. Flashes of peacock when the light moves across them. If you grew up understanding pearls as white, these read as costume beads that got dipped in dye. The common mistake is dark equals dyed. But real Tahitian cultured pearls can naturally be this dark. The colour comes from the oyster itself, a black-lipped oyster whose shell lining is naturally dark. Scientists call it Pinctada margaritifera. What matters to you is that the darkness can be the pearl's own colour, not a treatment. So the clue is where colour collects. Look at the area around the drill hole under magnification. On some dyed material, colour pools at the opening, or the edge of the hole looks a different shade than the outside. Look only. Never poke, widen, or scrape a drill hole to see better. You can't undo that. And what it doesn't prove. Modern dyeing is often very good, and it doesn't always leave anything you can see. Telling natural colour from treated colour can genuinely require laboratory equipment. Pooled colour is a clue. It is not an answer. Number 7 flips number 8 completely. This one's golden. Warm honey, deep butter, sometimes almost apricot. And because the colour is unusual, people reach the same conclusion from the opposite direction. Somebody dyed these. They may not have. There's an oyster with a gold-lipped shell that produces large pearls running from soft yellow through deep orange yellow, and that colour can be entirely the oyster's own. Those are South Sea pearls, farmed mainly in Indonesia and the Philippines, and they grow for a long time, which is why they tend to be big and thick-shelled. Quick question for you. 2 strands on the same table. One is small, white and perfectly round. One is large, golden and slightly uneven. Which one would you leave behind? Most people leave the golden one. Hold that thought. Here's where I think most advice gives you the wrong assignment. It tells you to figure out whether the colour is natural. You can't. Not in a store, not with a magnifier, not with any honest home method. So change the assignment. Don't ask whether the colour is natural. Ask whether this strand is good enough that the colour question becomes worth paying to answer. And 4 things together tell you. Large pearls, deep lustre, not surface shine, genuinely good matching across the whole strand, and a serious clasp with a metal mark on it. All 4, and the question is worth money. 1 of 4, and it almost never is. Let me stop the countdown for a moment, because this is where most of you will actually use this. A daughter is sorting her mother's jewellery box after the funeral. There's a lot of it, and there isn't much time. She has 3 choices. Donate the whole box, take a bulk offer from a buyer who's already looking at his watch, or spend 60 seconds on the one strand that looks a little different from the rest. So she does the 60 seconds. She flips the clasp and finds a worn mark she can't read. She sees knots between the pearls. She notices the pearls get smaller toward the back. She turns them sideways and the shine seems to come from underneath. And one pearl, near the clasp, doesn't quite match. Now, here's what I want you to notice. She still doesn't know what it is. Neither do I. But she now knows something far more useful. She knows not to sell it, clean it, or restring it yet. That's the whole win. That's what 60 seconds buys you. If you inherited jewellery from a mother or a grandmother, and you want to know what deserves a second look before you donate or sell it, subscribe. That's exactly what we do here. Number 6. Lumpy, oval, dented, and no 2 pearls alike. Potato shapes, drops, little rings around the middle. Every instinct says cheap. And this is the belief I most want to take from you today. Expensive pearls are perfectly round. That was never a test of real or fake. Shape is one factor out of 7 that the Gemological Institute of America uses to classify pearls. Size, shape, color, luster, surface, thickness of the pearl coating, and matching. Shape is one of 7. And there's something in that list shoppers walk right past. Matching. Matching isn't a description, it's labor. To assemble 40 irregular natural objects that still read as one deliberate necklace, somebody had to sort through a great deal of material and throw most of it back. So here's a test you can run without touching a pearl. Lay the strand in a circle on the table and step back. Even though every pearl is different, does it still look intentionally assembled? Does your eye travel smoothly around it? Or does it snag? Random beads snag. Matched strands don't. It's a clue, not proof. Good matching can also be modern and machine sorted. What it tells you is that somebody's time went into this, and time is the thing that's hard to fake cheaply. Number 5 looks like it came out of a craft store bin. Little flakes, petals, rice shapes. Freeform pieces that look like shell fragments glued to a string. This is the one that gets dismissed fastest. In the trade, these are often called keshi. They form as an accident. A farmed oyster rejects the little bead that was placed inside it, but keeps building the pearl coating anyway. So you get a pearl that's solid all the way through, with nothing in the middle. And that's where a very tempting mistake gets born. No bead inside must mean it grew naturally, right? No. Researchers at the Gemological Institute of America in Mumbai studied 43 of these using X-ray imaging and reported that some of the internal structures look a great deal like what you'd see in a truly natural pearl, which makes them hard to tell apart even in a laboratory. Sit with that a moment. Trained people with X-ray machines find this difficult. So anyone telling you it can be settled at home with a magnifying glass is either mistaken or selling something. Your action here is modest, and that's the point. Flag it, don't name it. Strong shine, unusual organic shapes, and a serious clasp together are worth a few dollars to take home. Trying to identify the category yourself is not. Number 4 looks like a child's necklace. Tiny pearls, sometimes only 2 or 3 millimeters. Several rows, with little bars holding the rows apart. It looks fussy and fragile and unimportant. The common mistake is using size as your first filter, so run the clock backward instead. Before farmed pearls arrived in quantity in the early 20th century, small pearls were still naturally formed pearls. Somebody had to find them one at a time and then match hundreds of them, which means the value in an antique multi-row piece often sits in the count, the age, the metalwork, and the clasp design, not in any single pearl. Action. Look at the bars between the rows and the finish on the back of the clasp. Handmade metalwork has a slight unevenness that machines don't produce. Photograph the back, not the front. The back is where the information lives. And what it doesn't prove. Tiny pearls are also exactly what cheap costume necklaces are made of. Small alone means nothing. Small plus handwork plus a period clasp is what makes you pause. Number 3 is my favorite because it's American. These don't look like pearls at all. Long, wing-shaped, feather-shaped, sometimes almost like a tooth. Pink, cream, lavender, brownish purple, with a strange shimmer. Most people assume they're pieces of shell. They may be river pearls, and they may have come from the middle of this country. In 2019, the Gemological Institute of America published a study of 854 naturally formed freshwater pearls from the Mississippi River system. The pearls came from Kari Anderson of Kari Pearls in Muscatine, Iowa, recovered as a byproduct of the shelling business. Most were irregular. Many had that distinctive wing or feather shape that divers call spike pearls. The colours ran from very light pink through orangey pink to brownish purple, and many had a pronounced shimmer. There's a longer history behind it. The American freshwater pearl industry was documented in the same journal back in 1984 by James, Sweeney, and John Leighton Dress. And the Leighton Dress family went on to farm pearls at Birdsong Creek in Camden, Tennessee. So when an odd, elongated pearl turns up in an American grandmother's jewelry box, it may have a history that runs a great deal closer to home than Japan or the South Pacific. Rivers in Iowa and Tennessee produced these. What it doesn't prove: a strange American pearl is not automatically worth thousands of dollars. Value there depends heavily on quality and on whether the history can be documented at all. But an odd shape has never been a reason to throw something away. Number 2 may be the single most useful minute in this video. Take 5 seconds and find the pearl that doesn't match. Go ahead, I'll wait. Now, most people find it and close the case immediately. Mixed pearls. Fake. That's the mistake. That one wrong pearl might be a replacement after the strand broke. It might be a repair. It might be a later addition when somebody restrung it. It might be a clasp pearl that was always different. Or it might be one farmed pearl sitting in a strand of naturally formed ones. At a Christie's sale of magnificent jewels in New York in 2024, one graduated strand came with a laboratory report noting 48 naturally formed saltwater pearls and 5 farmed ones, mixed and openly documented as mixed. It was estimated at $100,000 to $150,000, and it reportedly sold for just over $300,000. The mixture didn't destroy it. It was disclosed, and the market bought it anyway. In the same sale, another graduated strand with a clasp stamped Tiffany & Company came with a report noting 61 naturally formed saltwater pearls, estimated at $30,000 to $50,000, reportedly realized just over $200,000. And I have to say the obvious thing out loud. Those were laboratory-documented strands sold at a major auction house, with condition, size, matching, and paperwork all working together. Nothing about them predicts what's in your drawer. What they tell you is narrower and more useful. A mismatched pearl is not automatically a disqualification. Action. Find the odd pearl on purpose. Compare its drill hole, size, color, and wear against its neighbors, and note where it sits. Then use layer 3. A repair is context. Context is history. And history is exactly what raises the odds that something's been around a long time. Number 1. And it looks like nothing at all. Cream turning yellow. A little dull rather than glassy. Graduated, so the pearls get smaller toward the clasp. Not perfectly round. A plain old clasp with no branding. Silk gone soft and grey with age. It's the strand that looks most like ordinary grandmother pearls, which is exactly why it's the one most likely to end up in the donation bag. Run all 3 layers on it. Construction says somebody knotted this by hand and graduated it deliberately. Pearl behavior says the shine has depth even though the surface is tired. Context says this object has clearly lived a long life. Together, that's a reason to investigate. It is not proof of anything. You cannot tell whether a pearl formed naturally or was farmed by looking through the drill hole. You cannot tell by rubbing it on your tooth. What laboratories actually do is look inside with X-rays at the growth structure. The drill hole can give you a reason to be suspicious. It can't give you a conclusion. And now let me tell you why so many important strands ended up looking like nothing in ordinary drawers with no box and no papers. In 1917, Pierre Cartier wanted a mansion on Fifth Avenue in New York. He didn't mainly pay cash. He traded a double-strand natural pearl necklace, reported at 128 pearls, to Morton Plant, whose wife wanted it. Both sides thought that was a fair trade, because at the time, pearls like that were worth about as much as a mansion. Then farmed pearls arrived at scale, and the natural pearl market fell apart. When the estate was auctioned 40 years later, the necklace sold for a small fraction of what it had once been worth. Published accounts differ on the exact figure. They agree completely on the direction. That history is why old-fashioned and low value are not the same thing. Strands that had been serious assets simply became unfashionable. They stopped being insured. They stopped being documented. They got restrung by whoever was cheapest, and eventually inherited by someone with no reason to think they were anything. So the real skill isn't identifying a natural pearl at a thrift store. It's recognizing a strand that shouldn't be priced, cleaned, restrung, or sold until somebody qualified has looked at it. Here's the whole thing as one routine, because this is the form you'll actually use. 10 seconds. Look at the clasp before the pearls. Any mark, any metal stamp, a safety catch. 10 seconds. Look for knots between the pearls and whether the size is graduate on purpose. 10 seconds. Turn the strand sideways to the light. You're watching for depth, not whiteness. 10 seconds. Look at one drill hole area under magnification. Peeling, coating, an exposed core, pooled color. Look only. 10 seconds. Find the odd pearl and ask why it's different instead of assuming it's a flaw. 10 seconds. And this last one is the whole thing. Ask what it costs you to be wrong, a few dollars. Then ask what it could cost you to dismiss something that deserved a professional look. That's the entire calculation, and it's why hesitating is almost never the expensive choice. Now, a question almost nobody answers honestly. Not every old pearl necklace deserves a paid appraisal. Appraisals cost money, and spending it on the wrong strand is its own kind of mistake. So here's a traffic light. Red light. One weak clue and nothing else. Obvious peeling, coating, flaking off a plastic bead. Modern glued construction with no knots. A clasp with no mark and no craftsmanship. There's no shame in putting it back. Most strands really are what they appear to be, and knowing that protects your attention for the ones that aren't. Yellow light. Something's interesting, but it's alone. A worn mark you can't read. Nice knotting, but ordinary pearls. Photograph it, research the mark at home, and don't spend money yet. Yellow costs you nothing but time. Green light. Several unusual signals showing up together across different layers. Hand knotting plus deliberate graduation plus real depth of shine plus a marked clasp plus genuine age. Or any reason at all to suspect naturally formed pearls. That's when a certified appraiser or a gemological laboratory is worth paying for. And that's the only place a real answer lives. 5 things never to do. Don't scratch a pearl to test it. Don't use vinegar or any household chemical. Don't aggressively polish an old clasp. Don't restring a possibly important strand before photographing it exactly as you found it. And don't sell a suspected natural pearl strand on the strength of home tests alone. And you don't have to remember 10 categories. That's why I made the field guide. It's 1 page. The 6-step check, all 10 types, the traffic light, a make-a-mark checklist, and a blank box for the price, the store, the clasp mark, and what looked unusual. Print it, fold it, put it in your purse. It's free, and the link is in the description. Now I'd like to hear from you, and I want something specific. Describe the oldest pearl necklace in your jewelry box. The color. Roughly how big the pearls are, what the clasp looks like, and whether there's any mark on the back, and whether you can see knots between the pearls. Don't tell me what you think it's worth. Just tell me what you see. I read these. I'll say something that goes against most videos in this category. I don't think most inherited strands are secretly valuable. Most are exactly what they appear to be, and I'd rather tell you that than sell you a fantasy. But the number worth a second look is much larger than the number that ever get one, and the whole difference is 60 seconds. Pretty pearls get attention. Strange pearls deserve investigation. Pick it up. Flip the clasp. Look at the pearls from the side. Find the odd one. Photograph what you found. And if something doesn't add up, don't guess. Investigate. This is educational, not an appraisal, and not advice for insurance or legal purposes. Talk to a certified appraiser and check the rules where you live before you buy, sell, or insure anything. Now go look in the drawer.